Good morning and welcome to a Friday for Future edition of the OBX Wave Report. This particular special edition, we are going to focus on Climate Strike Week number 324. 324 weeks of the youth of this world striking to help to prevent catastrophic climate change, to reduce the climate emergency, to save our future. Spearheaded by Greta Thunberg, who has recently put together a new book that I would like to read, but who is continuing in her undaunting efforts to move our world away from the vast harm that lurks if we continue to burn fossil fuels and to emit heat trapping gases into our atmosphere. And I just want to highlight this tweet by Greta Thunberg and talk about some of the issues that strike me as we enter Climate Strike Week number 234. And I do want to encourage you all to please support the climate activists and the Friday for Future movement and to stand against the self-interested and harmful fossil fuel industry that is standing in the way of climate action and in the way of solutions to climate change, primarily being the mass deployment of clean energy and the cessation of fossil fuel burning. As we enter the 234th climate strike, I want to highlight a terrible tragedy that is continuing to unfold in Turkey, and one that is being highlighted by the Youth for Climate Action for Turkey. And according to this tweet was from a couple of days ago, but according to the reports that I've seen, it looks like as many as 20,000 people in Turkey and Syria so far have been found dead as a result of two powerful earthquakes that struck the region on February the 6th. And it is likely that the terrible toll of loss in these regions will continue to mount as we get more and more information from the disaster-stricken areas. Um, our hearts go out to all who are in Turkey now and who are in Syria who are afflicted by these terrible disasters. And I'd just like to give a shout out of support for Youth for Climate Turkey, who is right now working to help Turkey. I'd also like to give a shout out for Ukraine, which, though it is suffering now from a genocidal invasion by a harmful petrostate in the form of Russia, is also sending out aid to Turkey, even as it fights for its own survival. And as I watch the Ukrainians reach out and the youth climate activists reach out to help Turkey, I cannot help but be struck myself at the intersection of trouble and response. And for me, this natural disaster, though it is not directly related to the climate crisis, provides a bit of a warning for what the natural system can do when jolted. And in this case, this earthquake did not have a climate crisis driver, but as we, and I say we, I guess maybe what I should say is, as we allow the fossil fuel industry to continue to keep us captive to the harmful emissions into the climate system, we increase the likelihood of terrible disasters coming from the climate system. And this earthquake highlights how terrible the natural disasters or the disasters coming from a riled natural system can be. And right now, we do have some very severe climate change related impacts occurring as a result of very severe heat waves in Chile and forest fires that have forced hundreds to evacuate and have stricken the region with fires terribly, with a bit of a, like an asterisk beside it, but only in the range of about 1.2 degrees Celsius globally since the 1880s. Continued fossil fuel burning could put the Earth system in the range of 3 or 4 or 5 degrees Celsius warming by the end of the century. And the kinds of disasters that such a system under such a high degree of warming could produce are truly devastating to many regions of the world. So as we reach out to the victims of the earthquakes, let us also resolve ourselves not to allow our climate system to be perturbed to produce more disasters on top of the disasters that we would face normally, and an unfortunate likely system of catastrophic disasters that from the climate system would threaten our future and our children in the medium to the long term, even as we already see some of the impacts of climate change starting to occur. And I do want to show you the temperature maps provided by a re-rendering of the global forecast system, this graphic provided by Scott Duncan of the extreme heat waves affecting Chile, bringing air temperatures in the range of 45, looks like 45 to 50 degrees Celsius in the most hard hit regions. And off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly what that is as far as Fahrenheit, but it's in the hundreds. And that's extraordinary extreme heat for this region of the world, probably 110s, 100s, and then also wildfires as a result of that very severe heat, much hotter than normal for this region of the world. And yet another warning from the climate system that continuing to bow to the influence of the fossil fuel industry and allowing the Earth system and the human system to be held captive to it is a recipe for existential tragedy and loss. Okay, so speaking of climate indicators, one of the main climate indicators that we look at is sea ice, and Zach Labe is a fantastic monitor for us on sea ice. And right now, Arctic sea ice is currently at the third lowest on record and possibly tracking into a range of a record low for this time of year. And that Antarctic sea ice is tracking toward a record all-time low for any year in the satellite record. And in combination, the near record low Arctic sea ice and the record low Antarctic sea ice produce a record low global sea ice state. And this is an indication, an indicator of climate health or deteriorating climate health, and an indicator of increasing heat being injected into the oceans by fossil fuel burning. Greta Thunberg has been on point on the issue of funding for the fossil fuel industry, as have other climate activists. I also like to promote Bill McKibben. But here, Greta Thunberg is highlighting that the Norwegian oil giant Equinor just announced record profits of 62 billion pounds for 2022. This is higher than BP and Shell's profits combined. While raking in obscene wealth, Equinor and partners are set to receive more than 500 million in tax breaks for developing Rosebank. And apparently Rosebank is a a bank that is in association with fossil fuel development, and we don't really need to be funding fossil fuel development at this time. We don't disasters down the pipe as the result of continuing to burn fossil fuels and an increased likelihood of severe disasters, some of which we are seeing now. But for the future, if we continue to burn fossil fuels, that would be far worse. So why are we incentivizing harm? Some have pointed out, and rightly so, that the invasion of Ukraine was enabled by the co-enablement of the Russian petrostate to exert a harmful influence over Europe and to stave off a European defense of Ukraine in the face of a genocidal invasion. And that's simply a geopolitical harm. In addition, the burning of fossil fuels and the turning away from facts by fossil fuel industry and various bad actors around the world inflicts all of us living here with an increasing tempo of natural disasters from a climate system riled by the extra heat being injected. One of my favorite clean energy experts, and this from a tweet highlighted by Dr. Michael Mann, who is one of my favorite climate scientists and is definitely on point when it comes to highlighting the need for mass deploying clean energy as a solution and as an answer to harmful fossil fuel dependence is Mark Jacobson. And Mark Jacobson is an expert on pathways to reach 100% clean energy for both localities, for states, for regions of the United States and across the United States, as well as across the world. And the clarity of his expert analysis has provided me with more and more confidence that mass deploying clean energy is not only possible, but is possible on a rather near-term, rapid, and scaling basis. And this is a well-established fact in energy economy. And oftentimes now we have these experts coming into conflict with the paid agents of the fossil fuel industry, one of which is Judith Curry. And here we have Mark Jacobson rebutting Judith Curry in Held v. Montana. And it appears here also that there is an ongoing case to declare fossil support laws unconstitutional. And I would like to call you to Mark Jacobson's rebuttal. I'm just going to click through to it and look at some of the highlights of his expert opinion. And here he is talking about how there are there's a wealth of research right now showing that 100% renewable energies are 100% renewable energy systems are not only possible but desirable for a number of reasons. And in this case, confronting Judith Curry, who, as much as climate confusionist as she tends to be, is also a clean energy denier and an advocate for fossil fuel dependency, continuing fossil fuel dependency, which results in severe harm and ramping harm over time. And Mark goes on to talk about how, specifically for Montana, the rapid deployment of solar and hydro and other forms of renewable energy, wind, water, solar, across all electricity sectors is not only possible but desirable for a number of reasons. And the reasons he highlights are multitude. Um, One is that fossil fuels and uranium cause energy insecurity due to diminishing availability. Two is that reliance on centralized power from fossil fuel plants and oil refineries is also a trigger for energy insecurity. When you have energy insecurity, you're more vulnerable to grid failures and shocks. In Europe in particular, we recently had seen energy insecurity due to dependence on fossil fuels from harmful petrostates like Russia. Um, Mark highlights energy insecurity due to reliance on fuel supplies subject to human intervention. Um, this kind of points to how individuals and bad actors can corner the market on fossil fuels and create severe problems downstream in the energy system, such as price shocks, gouging, that kind of thing, uh, rationing, loss of supply. And this just because fossil fuels are easy to target by bad actors who can just purchase mines and wells and corner the market. Energy insecurity due to fuels that have mining pollution or catastrophic risk. And this relates to the issue of climate change as well as pollutant risk coming from fossil fuels. And the pollutant risk from fossil fuels is much higher than that of clean energy. The impact of clean energy is like a dot compared to the vast oil slick that is fossil fuels. And not only do you have spill problems and leak problems and explosion problems and nasty toxins in the environment problems, but you also have is a Friday for Future point that needs to be highlighted, even as we continue to support the climate activists who are out there taking point to hold the bad actors accountable, to hold politicians accountable, and to fight for a sustainable future, for a future in which our Earth system is vital and rich and prosperous for all who live here. And that's a good future. That's a happy future. That's not a future of scarcity or loss. That's a future of wealth, of the right kind of wealth, not the hoarding of wealth by a few, but the sharing of wealth by we the people and we the living. So thank you for joining me for this Friday for Future edition of the OBX Wave Report, where we highlight the good work by both the climate activists and the clean energy advocates, as well as the scientists who give us an ever clearer understanding of what a just path looks like. So thank you for joining me again. And I will be back with you shortly from the beaches. We're going to go out in nature and enjoy it.